The morning she was born, it was February, 1968. Snow had been falling since the night before, and the windows were sealed with it, white and heavy, the way Lancaster County winters could make you feel like the whole world had stopped. I was 22 years old. I had been in labor for 14 hours, and when she finally came, when I finally heard that sound, that first cry, they took her from the room before I could count her fingers. I did not hold her. I did not see her face. I heard her once, and then the door closed, and the sound went with it. My father was standing in the hallway. I know this because my mother told me years later in a letter she slipped inside a birthday card, the way you hide something you are not sure you should give. He had arranged it. He had spoken to the bishop. He had spoken to a family in another district. And by the time the midwife cleaned the room and the snow stopped falling, my daughter was already in someone else's arms. My name is Anna. I grew up Old Order Amish in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. I am 78 years old, and I spent 49 years not knowing whether my daughter was alive. This channel is where I finally say what my community would never allow me to say out loud. If you want to hear the stories that were buried, please subscribe and tap the like button. And leave me a comment. Tell me where you are watching from. I read every single one. Now let me tell you how it started, because it did not start with the birth. It started 3 years before, when I was 19, and I did something that in my community, in that year, in that world, was considered a sin so large it could swallow a family whole. I fell in love with a man who was not Amish. His name was Robert. He worked at a feed supply in the next county. He had kind eyes, and he drove a truck, and he asked me questions nobody had ever asked me before. Questions like, what did I think about things? What did I want? Where did I imagine myself in 10 years? Nobody in my world asked questions like that. You did not imagine yourself 10 years ahead. You lived the day in front of you and trusted God to fill the rest. That was not a complaint about my world. That was simply the shape of it. But Robert's questions opened a door in me that I did not know was there, and once it was open, I could not pretend it was a wall again. We saw each other for 8 months, quietly, carefully, the way forbidden things are always done. I told nobody, not my sisters, not my closest friend, the woman I had known since we were small children, sitting on the same hard bench at church, not the woman I worked beside every Tuesday at the quilting circle. I kept it the way you keep a candle inside your coat, against the wind, both hands curled around it, afraid of what happens if someone sees. In the beginning, I told myself it was not serious, that it was curiosity, nothing more. A season of asking questions, and then the questions would be answered, and I would come back to where I belonged. I believed this the way you believe things you need to believe to keep going. By spring, I knew I was not coming back the same way I had left. When I found out I was carrying his child, I was 4 months along. I had been quiet about the changes in my body the way I had been quiet about everything else, telling myself the exhaustion was work, the changes were nothing. By the time I could not tell myself that anymore, I was well past the point where anything could be undone. I told my mother first. I sat at the kitchen table on a Thursday evening in October, and I told her. She did not speak for a long time. The clock on the wall, the fire settling in the stove, her hands flat on the table like she was trying to hold the surface still. Then she said very quietly, "Your father cannot know yet. Give me a day." She did not get the day. He found out that same evening. I do not know how. In a small Amish community, secrets move the way water moves through soil, slowly, without making sound, until suddenly everything is soaked. What happened over the next 11 Sundays I cannot carry in 20 minutes. There are things this recording cannot hold. The names, the counting, the drawer, the dress I kept for 27 years. 3 years ago, I wrote it all down. The book is called The Sundays. The link is in the description and pinned in the first comment. What I can tell you is this: there was no shouting. That is the part that still lives inside me most. There was no screaming, no slammed doors, no fury I could have grabbed onto and pulled myself upright against. There was only silence and decisions made in rooms I was not in, and a future assembled without me, the way you build a fence around something you have decided to contain. I was not shunned. I want to be precise about that. I was not formally placed in the Meidung, not banned from the table, not made a stranger in the community. That would have required an official act, a process, a vote. What happened instead was quieter and in some ways worse. I simply became a problem to be managed. My father managed it. Robert was not told. I need to say that plainly. He did not know. When I could no longer see him without the arrangement being discovered, contact was cut, and he was told through a neighbor that I was to be married to someone in the community and wished him no ill will. That was the message. That was all of it. I did not write it. I did not send it. It was written for me, delivered for me, sealed and finished without me, as though I were a letter in someone else's hand. For years I wondered whether he looked for me, whether he drove past, whether he heard what happened and understood that the message had not come from me. I do not know the answer to that. I have made my peace with not knowing. The man I was to marry was Jonas. He was 26, a quiet man, a farmer, not unkind. He knew about the baby. My father had told him in whatever conversation men had in those days, about women who had made a mistake and needed to be settled. Jonas agreed to marry me. I agreed to marry Jonas. I use the word agreed loosely. There was a version of agreeing that looked like agreeing and was something else entirely. I did not say no. Not saying no in the world I came from meant yes. I understood this. Everyone understood this. We married in November of 1967. It was a small wedding. My dress was plain and dark blue, as was the custom. There were no flowers. Jonas was kind to me at the wedding and kind to me afterward, and I want to be fair to him when I tell this story because Jonas deserves fairness. He did not create the situation he walked into. He simply agreed to carry it. In January, I stopped being able to hide what was obvious to anyone who looked. In February, in the snow, on a morning I will never stop seeing, she was born. I have told you what happened next, the door closing, the sound going with it. Here is what I was told afterward. The family who received her were Amish, from a district 2 counties over. They had been hoping for a child for many years. They were a good family. That is the full accounting I was given. No names, no district, no road or farm or face. No way to find them, and no suggestion that I should try. The silence on the matter was total and immediate, the way you seal a room where something has happened that cannot be undone. Jonas and I went on to have 4 children together, a boy first, then 3 girls. Good children, each of them. Children I loved and raised and woke before dawn to feed and sat beside when they were sick. and watched become adults with children of their own. Jonas was a decent man. He never brought up the baby after the first year. I do not know if that was kindness or avoidance or simply the way he had been taught to handle things that had already been handled. In my world, what had been decided was decided. You did not reopen what had been closed. You moved forward, and moving forward looked like cooking and farming and church and children, and the dailiness of a life built on routine and faith, and the company of people who had known you since birth. We had all of that, Jonas and I. I do not want you to misunderstand me when I say that. The life I had was not a consolation. It was a life. But there was always the February of it. Every year when the snow came heavy and the windows went white, I counted. She is 3. She is 7. She is 12 and probably in school, probably learning to sew or to cook or to tend a garden. She is 15. She is the age I was when I first understood what it felt like to want something outside the borders of the world I had been given. I wondered if she felt that. I wondered if she knew there had been something outside her borders that she had come from. I wondered if she had questions that nobody was answering. I never spoke of her, not to Jonas, not after the first months, not to my children, not to anyone. I carried her the way you carry something you have been told you are not allowed to put down and not allowed to name. She lived in me like a season that came every February and passed every March and left me a little different each time, though nobody could see how. Jonas died in 2001. I was 56 years old. Our youngest child was already grown and gone from the house. I kept living the way you keep living when the structure of your days is what has always held you. The quilting, the church, the funerals, and the frolics, and the neighbors I had known for 50 years. I was inside the community, and I stayed inside it. I had been baptized. That matters for what I am about to tell you. In old order Amish life, baptism is a covenant, and breaking it after the fact is not simply a personal decision. It is a severing. The Meidung follows. You become, to the people you have known your whole life, someone who is no longer fully present at the table. I had watched this happen to others. I understood what it cost. I stayed inside. I kept the silence. I kept the February. It was my granddaughter who changed everything. Her name is Miriam, though she goes by something else now outside. She was 23 when she left the community in 2015. She left quietly and without drama, the way young people sometimes do when they have thought about something for a long time and simply one day walk through the door. The shunning was partial in our district by then, more complicated than it had once been, and we remained close. She visited in the summers. She brought her laptop, which I did not touch. She showed me things on it sometimes, gently, without pushing. She came in the summer of 2016. I was 71 years old. She sat across from me at the same kitchen table where I had told my mother everything in October of 1967, 49 years before. She had brought food, something she cooked herself in the English way, and we ate, and then she looked at me for a long moment, the way she sometimes did when she was about to say something she had been carrying for a while. She said, "Grandma, I think you should find her." I told her it was too late. She said, "Maybe, but you should know." She understood things about the outside world that I did not. She knew about mutual consent registries, places where adults who had been given away as infants could register, and where the families who had given them away could register in return, and the two records could be matched. She knew this was possible. I had not known it was possible. For 49 years, I had assumed that what had been sealed was sealed, that the door my father had closed had no key, that the silence was permanent, because silence in my world had always been permanent. Miriam sat with me at that table for 4 hours. She registered on my behalf with my information, my birth year, my county, the month and year the baby was born, February 1968, Lancaster County. She submitted it, and we waited. I want to tell you about the moment we found her, because it is the moment I have spent 8 years trying to find the right words for, and I am not sure I have them yet. 3 weeks after Miriam registered for me, we were sitting together at the table on a Sunday afternoon. Miriam opened the laptop. She checked the registry, and then she went very still. There was a match. Her name was Ruth. She had been born in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, in February of 1968. She had registered 2 years before us, in 2014. She had been looking for me for 2 years before I started looking for her. She had been looking for me. I did not speak for a long time after Miriam told me. The same silence my mother had sat in at this table in 1967. The clock, the quiet house, my hands on the surface. I think I understood in that moment something I had not fully understood before. That all those Februaries, all those years of counting, all that quiet caring, she had been somewhere doing her own version of it. She had her own drawer of Februaries. She had been waiting too. She grew up loved. I need to tell you that first, before anything else. The family who raised her were good people, as my father had said. Her mother, the woman who raised her, who rocked her, and fed her and taught her everything she knew about being a woman in the world, had died in 2009. Her father was still living when we first made contact. She had brothers, a full life, a marriage of her own, 3 grown sons who called her mom and meant it the way it is supposed to be meant. She also had a drawer. She told me about it in one of our first telephone calls. She said that for as long as she could remember, she had kept a small wooden drawer in her bedroom dresser, and inside it she had put everything she had ever found or been told about where she came from. A name, a county, a year, and a small folded note that had come with her as an infant that said only, "She is loved, she is wanted, please keep her safe." I had not written that note. I do not know who did. My mother, perhaps, or my father in whatever complicated landscape of love and shame and management lived inside a man who gave his daughter's child away and believed he was doing the right thing. I do not know. But someone pressed that note into the hands of whoever carried my daughter away on a February morning in 1968, and it traveled with her through every year of her life, folded inside a drawer, waiting for the day she opened it. She is 57 now. I am 78. We speak on the telephone every Sunday morning. I do not have much technology, but I have a telephone, and I have learned that Sunday mornings belong to her. We have not spoken about the note again since the first time she told me. There are things between us that do not need to become words to be understood. We are both women who learned in very different worlds how to carry something quietly. That turns out to be a thing we share. I have a photograph on my wall. It is the two of us taken in the summer of 2017, the first summer after we found each other. I am 72 in that photograph. She is 49. We are standing in a garden, and we are both squinting against the sun. And if you look at our hands, at the way we are both holding them slightly open at our sides, loose and still. They are the same hands. What I want to say to you now is what has taken me the longest to arrive at. My father was not a cruel man. I have spent more than 50 years deciding how I feel about what he did, and the answer I have come to is complicated and not finished, and maybe never will be. He was a man of his world, a world where a daughter who had a child by an English man was a wound that could tear open an entire family, in a community where family was the structure everything else was built on. He did what his world told him was the right thing. I do not believe it was the right thing. I have not believed it was the right thing for 50 years. But I understand the world that told him so, because it was my world too. And I know how completely a world can close around a person until they cannot see past its edges. What was wrong was the silence. It is always the silence. The decision made without me. The future assembled without my hands. The message sent to Robert that I did not write. The child carried from the room before I could see her face. The 49 years of February. My friend Margaret, who was also old order, and who also lost a child, though hers was to illness and not to arrangement, once told me that grief you are not allowed to name does not leave. It only learns to live in smaller spaces. I have thought about that for 30 years. It is true. The grief I was not allowed to have for my daughter lived in February, in snow on windows, in the counting. It did not leave. It just got very small and very quiet and very patient. If you are watching this and you have something like that living in you, something your family decided would never be spoken, something that was managed and sealed and handed to silence before you were old enough to understand what was being taken from you, I want you to know something. It is not too late. I do not know what too late looks like. I am 78 years old and I am still finding out. Ruth was 47 when she registered. She waited 2 years for the match to appear. I was 71 when Miriam sat down at that table and opened the door. We found each other across 49 years and 2 counties, and a silence so complete it had almost become the whole story. It did not become the whole story. The Sundays, what 20 minutes cannot hold. The link is in the description and pinned in the first comment. The morning is yours if you decide it is.